see a number of people that have been to the Augusta County Board of Supervisors, which is one of the most painful meetings that you could ever attend. We have debated, for example, how many miniature donkeys equal one donkey for a good 15 minutes. And we've done other ridiculous things like that. But we are important in the sense that we affect you directly. We help maintain your roads. We affect your schools. We affect your taxes. And so that's what I'm going to be focusing on. But before I get to there, I'll talk about myself, my background, so that you guys get to know me better. I'll give you sort of the Whitman sampler of local government, and then I'll be willing to answer any questions that you may have for me on local government. My family's been in some shape or form in Augusta County since the 1700s. We trace our roots back to a number of different lines, but I'm a Garber, I'm a Harmon, I'm a Johnson. I got all those family names in there somewhere. And during the campaign, it was kind of interesting because when I went back far enough, I actually met people that were somehow semi-related to me. So it was kind of an interesting experience. I'm the direct ancestor of the first mayor, Stanton, who was buried just a couple blocks that way. And so I have deep roots in here. And when I try to influence regionalism in Augusta County, I don't think that we need three governments to do the same job for 130,000 people. And so I have roots in Waynesboro. I talked to you, Mr. Clark, about that. My great-grandfather was a store owner in Waynesboro. My grandfather was the editor of the News Virginian in the 1930s. So we have roots in Waynesboro, roots here, and roots in Augusta County as well. So my family background is tied to this area. My past is tied to this area, my present is tied to this area, and my future is tied to this area too. So I'm excited to be here. I wasn't expecting yet to go over my whole educational background, but I will tell you that I went to college at Texas Christian University, and the thought process of an 18-year-old, I grew up in Virginia, but I wanted to be 1,000 miles away from home. I was incredibly sick and tired of my parents. We had a winter like we did this year, and I said, I never want to see snow again, so I want to be underneath the Tennessee border. I wanted to go someplace where I could feel comfortable with my faith. Ironically, I wanted to play football, and I did. I walked on the team, made the team for a couple years, and then met my wife and changed my priorities. But I also wanted to shoot. I was the high school rifle team. I was the captain there. I was ranked nationally in juniors in 4 position in the top 200 in the country. And so when I showed up there, and again, 18 years old, it turns out that we had an all-female rifle team to balance out the all-male football team because of Title VII. And so that was, I guess, my first experience in the federal government playing with my life. But it was a great experience. Came back, got my MBA at George Washington. There was a period there where I was an internal auditor and a risk consultant. So I went around and I checked books and I made sure that people were following the processes that they're supposed to. I looked at my bosses. They were all divorced. They were all miserable. They're all very wealthy, I might say. And I said, this isn't going to be for me. This doesn't fit who I am. And went back on my PhD in management. And what I actually study is how to manage people in organizations. So the short story of it is I survey employees. I look at their HR policies. I look at turnover performance. And I build statistical models and say, if you change this policy, it'll affect their attitude, which will lead to better performance or lower turnover. So that's my specialty and what I do best in research. I have a wife of 14 years. We've been together for 18 years, and we actually have 2 dogs that we got together who are both 18 years old. So they've seen my whole life, and with her, it's been kind of interesting. I am 36, but I have a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old now, which is why I was pretty much sick the entire winter and only half awake. But they're wonderful, and they've been just such a joy and a blessing for us. And we waited a little bit longer than most people, but we're very happy that we have them, and they're happy and healthy. And I'll talk to you later if you want, but my first one was a bit of a miracle because he actually saved my wife's life. We can talk about that. Like Ronald Reagan, I started off in politics because of my family. Obviously, I had someone who was in the News Virginian, who was the editor there. My grandfather ascended in the Associated Press and became the editor, the night editor of the Associated Press of all Europe, and went right after WW2 and published out of London. And both my parents, my father was born in Richmond. his family just left Stanton, so he's born in Richmond. My mother is born in Missouri, and they actually met working for U.S. senators, both conservative Democrats, and so that's the family household that I grew up in, and I was brought up in the Democratic mindset. That's the way I was trained, that's the way I thought. My parents weren't hateful people, so they never said anything terrible. They simply brought me up in a way of saying this is the right way to believe. And so that's where I started. It was a natural point for me. I then moved back to this area. Actually taught at Towson for a year, a little too far north for me. Moved back here, jumped at a chance, started to get settled down, started to get frustrated with all the debt. The economy is what drives me. Again, I teach business, and that's one of the things I really focus on. And so I got involved in politics. I show up at a Democratic meeting. A few meetings later, I was left holding the key of leadership. No one wanted it, so it was given to me. And during that year or so, I became dissatisfied with their positions, and I really saw a misalignment between who I was, the values of myself, my faith, going to Texas Christian University. I'm a man, I've never drank alcohol in my life. I've never smoked or done any tobacco products. I've never did any drugs or anything. And really, you know, looking back, it was kind of foolish of me to do that, but then it does make sense that that's where I started off. So I saw the light, I got frustrated, I got disassociated, I left the party. Later, I ran as an independent, ran in Augusta County, ran against now a good friend of mine. He was the former chair of the Augusta County Party. Won 70% of the vote. I've knocked on many of your doors and had many conversations with you. And as I was an independent, voting on the Board of Supervisors, you know, anyone can run on values, anyone can run on principles, but when you're forced to vote, that's when you really have to think about it. That's really when you have to be passionate about it and think critically. And I found myself voting conservative the entire time. Now, Ed was not a huge fan of me until after the first budget cycle. He may have said mean things about me. He tends to do that. But after the first budget, he sat down, we had a good, honest discussion, and that led to many other discussions that we had. And eventually he brought me over to being a true conservative, to being part of the Republican Party now, and him and Georgia played, and Bill Shirley played a big role in that. And it feels good to be home. Like I said in the beginning, it was a bit of an odyssey. You never really know where you're going to end up in life, but I guess it's the trip that will make things interesting. While some people consider that a liability, I consider it a great asset because I understand the other perspective, I understand the other side, I understand when my values disagree with theirs, and I think I can better articulate things like Ronald Reagan because I've seen the other side and I've seen the other perspectives. So what I want to talk about to you is some of the things I've done so far, and some of the things that I've been fighting for in Augusta County. My voting record so far, I've never voted to increase taxes. I'm the only board member in Augusta County that has not done so. I voted for the least amount of debt than any other board member in Augusta County over the last 2 years, except for the new member. She's only been there for a few weeks, but she'll be voting very shortly for a lot more debt. I also believe that being an elected official is an honor. It's an opportunity to serve my community. I spoke at a couple firehouses recently, and those guys volunteer for their community. They run into a fire, which to me seems the opposite direction that you should be going. They pull you out. They pay for all the training themselves. They pay for the mileage to their station. They miss all those birthdays, and they do it for free. And on the Board of Supervisors, we pay $10,000 to serve on the board, and we also get an additional $7,000 in health benefits. I've elected to take none of that. I'm forfeiting about $40,000 in salary over the 4 years, forfeiting the $28,000 with the health benefits. I don't take any reimbursements from Augusta County, and so my 2012 truck has 46,000 miles on it, many of which were going back and forth to different meetings. And so I've lost money being elected. And truthfully, I've loved every part of it, and I've loved serving the community, and I've had a great time interacting with you. A few things I propose in Augusta County. I propose a pay-as-you-go system. Right now, our county is average, right? So if you look at all the localities, our debt is about 50%, with half the localities below us, half the localities above us. We do a decent job in Augusta County. Our debt is $700 to $800 per person, which isn't bad. If you look at some of the other localities, it's thousands of dollars per person. So we do a decent job. But what I saw on the board was for large capital expenditures, we would take that and we'd spread it out over 20 years and we'd have to do a debt service. And in doing so, we cannot raise taxes, right? So we have revenue coming in, revenue falls off after, we have new revenue coming in, we have debt falling off. So let's say we've been paying $500,000 for 20 years and this year it comes up. That's $500,000 more that we can spend for Augusta County, and we can do it all over a long-term debt process and not have to raise taxes. And so I see a problem with that. One is there's a lack of transparency, because if people's taxes aren't raised, they don't really care that much what you do with their money. Right now, you guys are the opposite of that, but for the majority of the population, they're not really paying attention, right? And so it'll increase transparency and it'll prevent bad spending. The example I'll use is Greenville Sewer. How many of you guys have heard of Greenville Sewer? Okay, a number of you have been following that. Greenville Sewer had, it's a project to put roughly 100 houses on sewer. We spent about $1.5 million, $2 million in doing so. There were 2 failing septic systems out of those 100 houses. And yet, we paid that money out of taxpayer money, taking it from other localities in the area, right, other districts, giving it to this one community so that they could get on sewer. We subsidized each house about $25,000. Now, had we gone to the public and say, we need to raise money for this project, everyone would have said absolutely no. But because we're able to incorporate it into our current budget, no one seemed to really notice and no one seemed to care. The second thing I think it'll do is it decreases waste. If you spread out, and many of you may do this with your home mortgages, if you spread out debt long enough, it's a really small amount, right? So then you start going, an extra $1 million, that's only $65,000 extra a month. Wouldn't it be really nice to have that extra feature? So I think a pay-as-you-go system would also reduce waste, because people would have to, if you have to go to the public and you have to ask for extra money or you have to save for it, you're going to cut out all those extras. And so I propose that law 6-1, which isn't surprising. But what I hope is that I kind of lay that seed, that people will start thinking about that. Had we enacted this rule in 1993, Augusta County would be debt-free and you'd have a lower tax rate. Right? We'd have the flexibility during the recession to handle those situations. One of the other things that I've been working on is water monitoring. How many of you guys are familiar with the EPA and its plan for Augusta County and the surrounding area? So it's pretty extensive. If you add up all of the changes that EPA wants us to make by 2025, this isn't the government money being spent. This is individual property owners being spent. It's $159 million. The budget of Augusta County is $160 million. That's a huge amount of money. In that ruling, they want us to install 11 million linear feet of fencing. That's their plan. Every river, every stream, every creek, every dry spot that could have water in it needs to be fenced in. And not only that, if we fence it in 49 feet, it doesn't count. It has to be 50 feet or wider from the river, stream, creek, pond to keep livestock out. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of fencing. And they did this all based on sampling. They sampled 5 or 6 times a year. They built statistical models that have been revised over and over and over again. I forget what version we're on, but we're at least on the 20th version. And they're going to dictate eventually that our county taxpayers are going to have to pay for these changes to their property. So what I did, I said, and I have that scientific training, I said, rather than waiting on their estimates, why don't we actually measure this? And so it's in a budget amendment now. It's going through, if the budget ever gets passed at the state level, there'll be $256,000 for this program. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna put, we already have flow monitors which measures the volume of water leaving Augusta County. We're gonna put chemistry sets on top of those. We're gonna measure water every 15 minutes for the next 3 years. And at the end of 3 years, we're gonna know exactly how much is leaving Augusta County. If it's 10% less than what the EPA says, right, that saves us $16 million, our taxpayers. If it's 10% less than what the EPA says, think of the entire model, all the localities that are associated with it, how much help that's going to provide to our landowners. So that's one of the things that I've been working on. I couldn't get passed to the board, so I had to go through the state, and it's something that the farmers are behind. The executive board of Augusta County farmers, the Farm Bureau has supported it. The Ag Industrial Board has supported it. The Extension Agent has supported it. Yes, ma'am?
Why did the board not support it?
Because I proposed it. It's unfortunate, but it's true. I had 2 people that were going to support me on it, and I had 2 people that said I had no business talking about it. So, and then there's always a little bit of revenge because I've never raised taxes and never gone along with them. And there's, this is my baby, right? So if they can defeat this, they can undercut me.
I would take you and Tracy Piles are very close.
Tracy Piles and I represent the same population. Very rural, close to 81, relatively wealthy. The further out you go, very, very poor. When I went door to door, it took me 6 months, and I talked to you guys. It took me 6 months, 40 hours a week going door to door to hit my entire district. There are houses where someone got foreclosed on. They moved into next to their neighbor. They were living in a small, it was like 10-foot hut basically with electrical cord going out to there. So extreme poverty. So I would worry about those people. So we represent the same people. We don't always agree. He proposed the 5-cent tax increase. That's something I'll talk about later, but it's something I disagree with. My biggest fight has been trying to reform our school system. And I don't know if you guys have been following that whole fight, but every year something happens. And I've seen a number of you speak at the school board meeting, and I certainly appreciate that. And I'll talk about that here towards the end, where I need your help. But we have a conflict between the school board and the board of supervisors, and I'm one of the primary drivers of that conflict. I'm not trying to be angry, I'm not trying to be conflictful, but what I want is to change our school system. Let's go over the pure facts. We've lost 600 students in Augusta County over the last, 6 or 7 years, maybe 8 years, right? So we're having declining enrollment. We have 3,000 empty seats in Augusta County schools. We have, 21 locations. Our birth rate in Augusta County is the lowest it's been since 1980. And people that can have children within that age range is shrinking, just like the birth rate, right? So it doesn't look like we're going to have a huge population explosion in children. Our population is growing, and that's because how many of you guys are from a different state and retired here? All right, so that's why Augusta County population is growing, because people coming from out of the area, we have low taxes, we have a beautiful place to stay, they come here and retire, but they don't bring kids with us. So what I've been pushing for is a better use of our facilities. The school board right now is proposing, with debt, $72 million in new construction. That is a lot of money. If you add up all of that, their buses, their technology, their compensation plan over the next 4 or 5 years, you're looking at a 21-cent tax increase. And every year, there's a manipulation that goes on. Every year, they threaten some poor group of children and families and school employees that they're going to cut. So the first year, they proposed $7 million in cuts to make up for $3.5 million shortfall. Right? They said, we're going to close Craigsville, we're going to close the governor's school, we're going to get rid of varsity cheerleading, which was like $10,000 or something ridiculously. We're going to get rid of middle school sports. So they got a good swath of the entire population upset. The next year they said, well, we're gonna do all these drastic cuts. One of them was they're going to cut health insurance for bus drivers, and they're going to cut health insurance for cafeteria workers, which is something like $150,000 a lot of money to each of us, but in a $160 million budget, relatively small. They tell them the same day that they're going to cut that insurance. By the way, we're going to go speak at the Board of Supervisors and ask for more money. Please join us. This year, it backfired. They said, we're going to close Verona Elementary, right? All three situations, and this is my issue. You can play politics, but all three situations, I had people call me. I had children crying. If you've been to any of those Augusta County Board of Supervisor budget hearings, you had people in tears thinking that the thing they love the most is going to be cut. When all of us knew on the board, there was no way they were cutting it. They were just playing games. And it's very frustrating. In the last 2.5 years, only one school board member has ever directly asked for my input. Right? I usually get the call, this is what we want, this is what we want you to do. Please support us or you don't support schools. So what I've been asking for 3 budget cycles now is a strategic plan. I can't imagine, it's a $102 million school system, it's got 1,400 employees. I can't imagine it not having a strategic plan, and again, that's my business background, but they quite literally live year to year. And that's no way to live when you have that big of a school system. And so what I've said is we'll map it out, we'll set goals of what we want to accomplish, we'll have mile markers for performance, we'll get feedback from the Board of Supervisors who's supposed to fund it, but more importantly, we'll get feedback from teachers, administrators, parents, and children. It'll be all of Augusta County's strategic plan. There'll be no more surprises. We'll know what's going to happen year to year. We know what the county will have to make up if the state doesn't do its job. We'll know what the county has to make up with the federal government. We'll also, and this is key to me, when the economy starts picking up and all signs look like it's slowly recovering, we'll have to do something with those surpluses a little bit smarter than what we did in the past. Right? So setting up a human capital account to pay wages for the recession periods. So there's a better way to do this. And so that's one of the things I've been pushing for. It's one of the things I've been fighting for consistently. I've been told we have a strategic plan. I'll get it to you, Dr. Pattie. The next year is we have many plans, right? And they're starting to work on a plan, but no one's ever seen it. I saw the bones of it, and so I don't call it a strategic plan, I call it the secret plan that no one really knows about. So one of the things that you could do is talk about with them, we need a strategic plan. Some other facts that I find interesting. You've all heard that we're losing the best and the brightest and the smartest teachers in Augusta County, right? And you pointed this out at the last budget cycle, which was awesome. And then I actually researched it. I was in a meeting with the school board members, and I had them cornered. And so I was able to say, all right, how many teachers do you have? Oh, about 850. I actually have 851. I said, how many teachers do you lose every year? They gave me the number. I said, how many of those retired? All right, how many did you fire last year? They say, well, last year we didn't fire any. The year before we fired 1 to 2, right? Which that's kind of suspicious. 20 to 25 teachers leave every year, which is less than 3% of the teacher population, because 1, they weren't retiring, or 2, they weren't fired or pushed out. A very small turnover. That turnover is actually relatively unhealthy when you think of, you want enough turnover in an organization to get a good lifeblood in there. So we don't necessarily have a turnover problem. We pay our teachers strictly based on tenure. So the longer you've been a teacher, the more you get paid, right? So we're giving teacher raises, and it does have an impact on their families and helps them some, and so I'm not saying that's a terrible thing, but we have no merit pay, right? In higher education, we have merit pay. If we don't perform, if we don't do our research, we get teacher evaluations, which we live and die by. If our teacher evaluations are terrible, we're not researching, we don't get merit pay, we just get a cost of living increase. My tenure rate in my department is less than 50%. So it's very hard to get promoted. And so what I would want is, in that strategic plan, is a performance management system that encourages performance, that rewards our top teachers. There's some great teachers that get the same evaluation that poor teachers get. And they're all probably at a decent level. I'm not criticizing teachers, right? but what's your motivation for going the extra mile? Now, luckily, teachers are naturally intrinsically motivated to do a great job, but we ought to reward the best teachers for doing a great job. And so that's one of those things that I would like to see change in our school systems. We've cut 100 positions, a little bit more than 100 positions in Augusta County. Performance has been level, which typically shows that some of those positions, not all the positions, but some of those positions probably weren't needed. We've cut back some programs in our school systems that probably are needed. Right? Summer school for people that are struggling. There's a few things in there that we probably need to add back strategically. Let's put that in the plan. As a community, I don't think anyone says we're against education. Now, we're all against the Common Core. That's a terrible thing that we don't want. But we're not against education. We do want our kids to be educated well, but we want it efficiently, effectively, and we want to have say in what's going to happen in Augusta County and in our school systems, and most likely in Stanton and Waynesboro too. So that's been my fight for so long. This year's budget, they're getting an additional $4 million roughly. The majority of that is going to operations. The majority of the operations money is going to salary. They are getting an additional $1 million for computers, which are probably necessary. But again, they're paying $330 for a Chromebook. Chesterfield County is paying $198 per Chromebook. Last year, they rolled out their laptop plan at Stewart Middle School. And I went over there. It looks like it's reasonably successful. There's always a downside to technology as well. But they bought Apple Macs, Airs. And so for the price they paid for that Stewart Middle School laptops, they could have had laptops in every middle school in Augusta County. And so that's what I mean, more efficient, more effective. I'm not against education. I'm an educator myself. I've been teaching for 10 years, but there's a better way to do it. There's a more efficient, more effective way to do it. I proposed crazy things that get me in trouble. I said we have 3 different bus fleets, and all the buses take the kids to school at the same time. If we merge Waynesboro, Stanton's, and Augusta's bus fleet, we could get rid of a lot of the older buses. We could stagger the start times for the school system, and we'd have fewer labor costs, fewer durable good costs as well. And so I think that's an efficient, effective way to do that. Anytime I propose regionalism, they laugh. They say, we agree with you, but it's never going to happen. But maybe we can start putting pressure on those things to happen. And in the long run, again, we don't need 3 governments for 130,000 people. We can do just fine with 1. We've had tremendous success in Augusta County. We've added 6 firms, either new or expansions. We have 302 more jobs being added to the Augusta County economy. We have over $111 million of new investment. And really, we have an extra 200 jobs opened up in Augusta County because they underestimated how successful those branches are. And I think that's a testament to our county citizens, because our county citizens are honest, they're hardworking, they're smart, and they're very productive. We do so much better as far as productivity than Southwest Virginia does. And that's because of our people. So it makes my job easier to attract new people, but we've had tremendous success there. Fire and rescue, we added 21 firefighters to the Augusta County system, which is something I supported. I don't like taking federal grants, but the federal grants, they did give us a federal grant, and that gave us enough time to set it up, to experiment, and those firefighters are paying for 2/3 of their own expenses. So strategically, how we lay them out in Augusta County, where we put them, they're actually recovering revenue for us. And so for roughly $200,000 to $300,000, we've added 21 firefighters to Augusta County. It makes us safer, it helps with our ISO ratings, it helps with insurance costs, and so that's something that I did support. I will be also putting on a leadership training for young officers that are going from being staffers to officers too, so I do support our fire and rescue. We're adding 6 new firefighters this year in Augusta County, and that's something I don't agree with. The 21 firefighters are supposed to be a stopgap until we figured out the cause of our problem. And the cause of our problem in Augusta County is we're losing volunteers. We're losing these great resources. Some of it's our fault, some of it's the state's fault, some of it's their own professional industry's fault by raising such high levels of standards of training. But every new firefighter we add, we're not spending money on volunteers and focusing on volunteers. And I think they're the best deal for us in Augusta County. For every 10 or 15 volunteers that we have, we probably save $60,000, $70,000. Those are the guys that go, again, they rush into the fire crazily. I'm running out, they're going back in. And those are the people that we need to find a way to support. We're spending, $100,000, a couple $100,000 on them. We do have an equipment support system so they can borrow money from us and not have to pay interest on it. So we do support them, but we've got to find a way to get volunteers involved in Augusta County for us to be successful. We've added 4 deputies. You'll read that in the news. The total cost is about $138,000. So they say, we're giving teachers raises, we're adding deputies, we're adding firefighters. It's all necessary. 3 of those deputy positions expired, so we found money for them in a temporary money fund. They rolled off. We added them back, but we don't need a tax raise to put those deputies back on the road. One of the things that maybe you guys have heard about is I've been fighting for getting internet to the western side of Augusta County. And many of you live out there. I live in a triangle where I'm between 3 fire stations. I get no internet except for my cell phone, and it's a very difficult way to live. I talk to people knocking on their doors, and they said, you know what, I lost a job because I didn't have established long-term internet. And so what I've been working on is a strategic plan, not for the county to pay for the internet service, but to incentivize organizations to come to Augusta County to set up the latest technology to spread internet. And so what we do is you run a wire to a telephone pole, you put a dish up there and you direct it towards an area, and then you relay that signal throughout the areas where you don't have internet. You don't need a direct line of sight anymore. You can bounce signals off the walls, you can bounce signals off hills and mountains and houses. So there's new ways to deliver this service efficiently, effectively, and get internet to people that don't have internet. And so I think that's very valuable. Part of Stewart Middle, where those laptops, those really expensive laptops, there's a significant number of those kids that go home and they don't have internet access. So they don't do much good at home unless they're able to download those assignments before. As we all know, we're all waiting on the Medicaid issue in the state government. And so we budgeted for it. We budgeted the most conservative way that we can, expecting that we're going to get the least amount of money. I assure you that we'll spend all the money if we get extra money, though. So that's a bit of a frustration right now. We're hoping that will get resolved, so we'll know exactly what we're going to be dealing with. So now, one of the things that I've been losing right now, 6 other supervisors have said they support the 5-cent tax increase. That's fine, that's their own right, but here's the problem. Every Augusta County Board of Supervisor meeting that we have hundreds of people that want to raise taxes, and we have 2 or 3 people that don't want to raise taxes. And so the media reports that the vast majority of Augusta County citizens want taxes increased, and that's why we've had taxes for 2 years. It's probably why we're going to have a tax increase this year. So if you're against that, if that's something that you don't want to see, on April 16th at 7 p.m., that's a Wednesday night, come out to the board meeting. If you don't want to talk, don't talk. Just take up a seat and express your feelings about whether you think taxes should be increased or not increased. Other questions for me? I deal with 21 and 22-year-olds, so they get angry, upset, and frustrated, so I think I can handle this crowd. Yes, sir.
This laptop program,
Mm-hmm.
Ed and I talked about this a little bit. It seems to me it's really questionable to buy that expensive of units.
Mm-hmm.
And plus, when they get out of school, they're not coming out into a Mac world,
Oh, I
they're
know.
still a PC world.
Yeah. Had the community been part of that say, they say, well, we need this for business. I make fun of my students that have Macs. I go, what do you have a Mac for? We don't use that in business. So I agree with you completely.
Yeah, we both, Levy still agrees with me that for the amount of money they're talking about, they could go to servers and workstations.
Yeah.
Of course, that wouldn't give a carry-home ability, but is that really that beneficial?
There's some advantages and disadvantages to everything. But certainly you don't want to spend $1,000 on a laptop when you can spend $200.
Well, my other suggestion is, if you're gonna buy a laptop, they should get the tow boxes like the cops and soldiers have.
Those are $5,000 a piece, so don't put that in their
Which
minds.
won't replace them. You won't be replacing them.
Yes, sir.
The question is, do they run your household like they run your?
All right, do they run the household like their government? No.
That's-
And so the reason why I proposed the pay-as-you-go was because that's not necessarily how I live. That's how I try to live. But once in a while, you need to extend something a little bit better to make it survivable, right? But when you do that for government, you know, we can't spend enough money. Yes, sir.
I went to one of the meetings when the teachers were asking for a pay raise.
Yeah,
Now, I don't mind giving a pay raise if I get a quality bump.
yeah,
But we rank back to 20% in growing education. If you're throwing money in education, it doesn't do it.
right.
It's for the children. Well, it's not a sacred cow. Show me some results, and fine. If you deserve a raise, you should get a raise. But the fact that it's a sacred cow, and they stack their meetings if they all have kids in school,
It's frustrating. Here's what they say. They go, Dr. Pattie, you can do no wrong by funding education. And that is a standard line where I've heard from multiple superintendents tell me that. And so, yeah, I'm taking quite a hit politically for standing up against this, but I think it's necessary. We need accountability. I want good education as well as you guys do, but I want it efficiently, effectively. And just like when I do my research, I do research for another county school system that's almost identical to Augusta County. And so, again, as an HR guy, if we invest money in our people, we want to see one, decreased turnover, which isn't a problem, or B, we want to see increased performance. So if I could come to you, if I could come to the Tea Party and say, we're spending $1 million extra, but we're going to increase performance by 5%, by 10%, people will consider it at least. They go, okay, well, I know what I'm buying, right? If I go out and buy a truck, I know I'm getting a truck, right? But we're investing people to make people feel okay about relative to how other people are paid. That's not necessarily the best strategic way to spend your money.
A few of the talking points for someone who would favor the 5% increase, and what are a few talking points for someone who would oppose 5% increase?
We got to do this. That's the talking point. We're supporting our core services, teachers, education, first responders. You know, the guys that are going to save your life in the sheriff's department. The guys are going to rush the house. So that's the talking point. It's not our fault. It's the state government's fault for pushing this down on us, right? We lost money. Now the truth is, if you look at our revenues, it's a net plus, right? The schools do have VRS increases, but they're going to net plus about $100,000, which isn't a lot of money. But we are seeing growth in Augusta County. My argument for not raising taxes, and whether this catches on or not, is we need to make sure our money is being spent wisely. And until we have systematic changes in our school system, which is the fundamentally where most of the money is going, if we don't get that impact that we want from that $4 million per year, then what's the purpose of doing that, right? Again, if I can look you in the eye and I would come up here and say, if we can do this and it's going to increase, you know, I have a 2- and a 1-year-old. I want good education for my children. If I can come up and say to you, it's going to actually improve education, that's something I can fight for. And I talked to Chuck Bishop. I said, before the first budget, I said, give me something to fight for. Give me something to go out in the public and fight for. And that's never been forthcoming. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Just a comment about Chuck Bishop. Last year during the budget fight, during the midst of that whole thing, he got a brand new 250, a brand new like F-250, 350
Okay.
pickup for his personal. I don't know why the school board furnished his a vehicle for the his own private vehicle, much less a truck that's pouring gas mileage. But when they're going to cut benefits to the bus drivers, he can afford that. I mean, it's just wasting money, and they just want to expand their budgets.
I cringe every time I see a fire truck with a Class 3 hitch on the back.
Yeah.
You know the F-150 type things. I just kind of cringe and go, you know, how many times do we use that hitch really? So yeah, I see that. And then the hypocrisy of cutting their health insurance but not cutting the school board members' health insurance. I think there's a lot of ways. I don't want you. A lot of people get really negative in government, right? I'm involved in government because I believe in it. I believe in a small, limited, but efficient, effective government that's going to help and do what it's supposed to do and not do what it's supposed to do, right? So finding that balance. I think it can be great. It was great. We did a lot of tremendous things, but we've also done a lot of really dumb things as well, and I'm trying to prevent those.
The $72 million building fund,
Yeah,
is that to put up a new school or is that to refurbish the schools that are?
great. Right, and you had your hand up too, and I haven't asked you. $72 million, right? So Ed's done a tremendous job. We talked multiple times. He has a map if you want to see it. Here's what I suspect is going to happen, right? Here's their dream if they can do it. They're going to build a middle school at Buffalo Gap, middle school at Riverhead's complex. They're going to build a new elementary school at Riverhead's and tear down the one they have. And they're going to add an expansion to Wilson Middle School. And in doing that, they're also going to close, my guess they're going to try to close Verona and Beverly Manor Elementary. And so it's relatively complex what so they're shifting things around. But again, we have the assets. I found out in the last school board meeting, for example, we have $4 million in backlogged school maintenance issues that we haven't been addressing. I would address those before I would address that. I think and in my pay-as-you-go system, I said that if we don't have the money, we'll do a sunset tax, right? So we'll raise the money for a specific project and then the tax goes away. If we need to fix buildings before it turns into an $8 million problem, that's something that I could support. I could go out there and say, we need to fund, we need to make sure these, but right now they're pie in the sky. They're going to build these beautiful buildings, and there are some, we have pod schools in Augusta County, and there are some safety concerns about this. But it'd be cheaper to put a deputy there than to spend $72 million and deal with those concerns directly. Yes, sir.
You sound like our founders, which is really great.
Oh, good. I like questions like that. More of that. Did you have your hand up?
I did. Thank you. You are a breath of fresh air.
You're welcome.
And keep on.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I will.
Let
I'll
us
keep
know
fighting.
how we might help and educate us,
Okay.
and you get that help.
I brought plenty of cards if you want to email me. If you want to invite me to anything, I'll show up to anything I can that my wife and children will let me. If you want to ask me questions, if you see something in the paper which we know is god-awful, ask for clarification. You're more than welcome to do that. I'll turn it back over to Ed and Bruce, and I'll stay around afterwards and answer whatever questions that you may have for me individually. But thanks again for inviting me. This is a lot of fun.